Okay, if I can ask board members to come back up to the dais so we can get started. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with board member activity reports. Board members?
Ms. Grijalva?
Mr. Juarez.
I was lucky enough to get invited by some of the grounds crew over at Pueblo to look at some of the stuff they were doing over there and talk to them about some of the field improvements that they were doing over at Pueblo, and they were real happy. Also participated to an extent, I guess, or was present at Vision 2015, 2016. I don't know if that was in the calendar or not, but I think that was within that time frame. Of course, the aforementioned Steps to Success, and I want to thank Dr. Sanchez for bringing that to TUSD. It is, like I said, very impactful. Meet the Teacher Day at Carrillo, that was fun. Also, the issue with getting the young man to Choya and getting him to his first class, that was wonderful. And the staff, I just want to acknowledge the staff over at Choya, the counseling staff. All of our counselors do an amazing job on the first day of school. Had my one-on-one with Dr. Sanchez, the back-to-school event with Ms. Grijalva over at Pueblo. That was pretty awesome. I felt like a cheerleader up there with you. That was pretty cool. The African American Parent Conference this past weekend. And then on Monday, I got an opportunity to jump rope with the Principal Lambert over at Hollinger. That was pretty cool. And I was at Grijalva this morning. I'm supposed to go there tomorrow, but I was able to go today, this morning, and got a chance to talk with some of the early ed teachers there. Got a chance to see the level libraries and the cows, which they're really excited to have. So that's all I got.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Foster.
So I attended the Bilingual Feria de Lectura, and it was so good to see our magnet schools represented there, our Mexican American Services Department, and our language acquisition team. That was important. And so many students there. Wow, what an event. I joined Dr. Sanchez and the school administrators and the community at the Visions 15-16 school year event as well. Stop by to thank community volunteers at Mary Meredith and at Van Buskirk. Dr. Sanchez mentioned earlier different church organizations around our community that have kind of adopted different schools. And I helped EEF collect school supply donations. We stuffed the bus. On the first day back, I joined the teachers at Vale Middle School. I think Mr. Hicks was there with me, and to welcome back breakfast for the teachers. And thank you to Principal Leal Holmes for that invitation to join them. I stopped by Oyama to see the condition of their playground, and voila, it was fixed before it was amazing that it was already fixed by the time I got there, and got a tour of their school by Mrs. Christopherson. And I wanted to thank her for spending time with me after that. And on Friday, I had the honor of participating in the EEF Spelling Bee with other elected officials and community leaders like Steve Farley and Virginia Romero and Martha McSally. The auditorium was just packed. It was such a turnout for public education. And it was people like former board members Lolly Almquist and Victoria Steele were in the audience. It was such a good event. On Saturday, I also participated in the African American Parent Conference, co-chaired by Ms. Daisy Jenkins and Dr. Adrian Vega. And I wanted to thank both of them for putting that event on. And I want to take a moment to say how impressed I was with Dr. Art McCoy, who presented at the conference. He's the former superintendent of Ferguson, Missouri. And I encourage all of us to learn more about his work and the important changes that his leadership brought to that school district, and then what happened to that work when their community overturned their school board. It's a case study that we really should all be familiar with here in Tucson. And lastly, I met with Dr. Sanchez Monday morning to prepare for tonight's meeting. Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. I also participated in Steps to Success. We had a list of 9 students and were able to talk to 6 of them, so that was really great. Also was at the African American Parent Conference. I participated in a breakout session at the Canyon Ranch Institute with Moses Thompson, speaking about policies and regarding garden to table and what has happened here in TUSD. went to the Pima County Democratic Executive Committee meeting and gave them a little update on TUSD, and that's something that they'd like to hear more often. I was also at the PEP Assembly at Pueblo High School, and with the permission of Dr. Romero, the principal there, asked Mi Familia Vota to be there to register any students or staff that are interested in registering to vote, so that was really great. Also went by the Oyama Playground. It's a school that's very near my house, so I was able to see all the repairs and the transformation there, and had my one-on-one with Dr. Sanchez.
And Ms. Grijalva,
yes.
I did forget that both Camwaras and I represented ourselves and TUSD at the press conference for Rosa Robles,
Yes.
who's in sanctuary here in our community, and so we stood with elected officials from every elected body in our town to stand up for her rights and to bring her back to her family.
Great. Okay. That's all? All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on to call to the audience. This is the opportunity for any members of the audience to speak to the board. I'm going to go ahead and read some instructions. Public participation at board meetings. Members of the public may speak during the call to the audience portion of the agenda. I'll be responsible for recognizing speakers and for maintaining proper order by setting such limits as may be appropriate. Any person desiring to speak shall complete a call to the audience card. When addressing the board, an individual shall state his or her full name and address before going into the subject matter. Individuals are encouraged to be brief with a maximum time limit of 3 minutes. At 2.5 minutes, Ms. Foster is going to go ahead and put up
Makeshift
this
sign.
yellow sign, letting you know you have 30 seconds remaining. And it appears we're going to have a timer over here,
As well.
right to the right of the podium. Individuals attending in the meeting and are speaking before the board shall observe rules of propriety, decorum, and good conduct and refrain from impertinent or slanderous remarks. At the conclusion of the call to the audience, I'll ask if any individual board members wish to respond to a criticism made by those who've addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. No more than one board member may address each criticism. With that, I'd like to call up and welcome back to the boardroom Maggie Schaefer, followed by Jorge Leyva and George Youngerman.
Good evening, President Grijalva, members of the board, Dr. Sanchez, council, distinguished guests. My name is Maggie Schaefer, and I am the Director of Field Experiences for the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Sociocultural Studies at the U of A. And I'm here tonight to thank the many professionals in your district for their outstanding partnership since I stepped into this role. My office facilitates the placements for early childhood, elementary, and some middle school program students, and I'm here tonight to tell you that your professional people have been a delight to work with. From my perspective, everything is running perfectly. Last year alone, we placed 79 student teachers in 39 Tucson Unified classrooms and 231 students doing practicum work in 27 schools throughout your district. This does not just happen. It takes first a cooperative teacher, a principal, a program director, a special education assistant director, a human resources administrator to make this partnership work. And your teachers do so much without teacher candidates. I could go on and on. I'd need 10 minutes. But I want to let you know that even the early childhood teachers that work in the preschools through grade 2, they are part of our CREATE program, and they meet once a month, unpaid, uncompensated, just to have professional learning in a shared learning space with student teachers and professionals at the University of Arizona. And who benefits but the students in Tucson Unified? So kudos to those teachers for their outstanding work and all of those who take time to mentor. I'm also happy to report that we currently have students learning to be teachers in cohorts on 3 TUSD campuses. Grijalva, Robbins, and Hollinger, and Dr. Timothy Gravoy-Shaw, Chandra Thomas, and Brian Lambert have been extraordinary. I can't name all the principals because they are all so extraordinary, and when I did, my assistant timed me today, I was like 4.5 minutes, and like, okay, I've got to take the names out. So if you're listening, I love you. I love that you call me right back. Your emails are so professional because you know the future of Tucson means that we need to produce high-quality teachers teachers and keep them in Tucson. I'm working with TUSD professionals to do just that. So principals, administrators, thank you so much. A shout out to Rachel Hockheim and the PACE leadership for their partnership. The assistant directors in special ed have been great. We're going to have 30 special ed student teachers coming out this spring, and I will make sure that TUSD gets your share of those as well. I also want to thank principals for the bulk of practicum placements. I do want to name these folks because they take most of our practicum students. Rob Jewett, Christian Lomitz, used to be Roman Soltero, I wish him Godspeed. Denise Contreras, Robin Weldon, Julie Laird, Jose Oliva, Steve Trejo, Leah Dardis, Nate Edwards, Jay Alexander, Dr. Seth Alshire, I should have said Dr. Julie Laird, Lori Connor, Mark Alvarez, Richard Sanchez, Olga Gomez. We're going to Myers-Ganong this year. So Elsa Aguirre. Everywhere I turn, there are people that said, yes, we'll mentor. Yes, we'll reach out. Yes, we'll make Tucson stronger. I wanted to thank Janet Rico-Urug also for making all the paperwork go online. No more dead trees, thousands of papers cut. Janet, you've done a marvelous job. And lastly, because I know you're wondering, they all have fingerprint clearance cards, and we personally check them not once, but twice a year. Every semester, we make sure they're updated so your students, our children in Tucson, are safe. God bless the work you do. Relationships are great. Just call me if you need me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie.
How do you like
Jorge
that?
Leiva.
That's my intro. I came here for a request for the board and a little bit of history. So my kids go to Sabino.
And your name?
George Leiva.
Okay.
Or Jorge,
If you can
either
move
way.
your, there you
There we go. It's a
Perfect.
little taller. Jorge Leiva, George, hey you. I've got 2 daughters at Sabino, one that graduated last year and at the university now. So anyway, there was a board item brought up about 3 months ago or so, February, about expanding Sabino and Fruit Tendler. And you heard all the parents, very positive support, and I thank the board for their decision. But I do want to talk about my personal experience and what we did in that regard. So when my eldest was at Fruit Tendler, being long-range planners, we looked ahead to what was going on, right? So our option at that point was either Townsend or McGee, with Dodge being a magnet. So Magnet, we applied right away. We wanted to go there. Great academics, great school. Townsend and McGee just did not meet my criteria. And I'll be honest, I mean, the academics were not very good. McGee is still a C, Townsend is closed. We all know the story. So we didn't get into the lottery at Dodge. We applied, we tested and accepted into Esperero. We were this close to going there. About July of that year, we won the lottery, literally, and we got into Dodge. Great experience, great school, great staff. Went from there to Sabino. Again, I'm very proud of my girls. Senior class president, student body president right now, freshman class. I mean, great academics, great athletics. Everything about it is fantastic. The reason I bring that up is because my criteria for selecting Dodge and not going to McGee or Townsend was solely based on academics. I'm an engineer, but to me, that's what's going to give you the lead, right? And so I urge everybody to look at that. Now, in that board meeting, Mr. Juarez made a comment. I think you deserve attention. You were the only one that really caught the essence of the problem, and the problem being performance, academic performance at the middle school level. At that meeting, you tasked the staff to come up with a plan to improve that. And I guess my request, and it's a very simple one, is transparency. If you have a plan, I'd like for you to share it with the group, the community at large. And if not, I urge you to really look at that, because I look at elementary schools. We have, again, great schools, high schools, again, but the middle schools is a problem. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
George Youngerman, followed by Lillian Fox. And that is my last card, so if anyone else wishes to,
Does that mean I can speak longer?
I'm sorry. Right, well, you can put your name in again, I guess. Yes,
Yeah.
Go ahead, sir.
My name's George Youngerman. I'm a parent of a sophomore at UHS, member of the UHS Parents Association, treasurer of UHS Site Council, member of TUSD's Calendar Planning Committee, and a substitute teacher for TUSD for 16 years. Before I started substituting, I ran a successful advertising marketing agency in San Francisco for 26 years. Substituting allows me the flexibility and time to operate my horse ranch. I teach an average of 118 days each year, primarily at 2 elementary schools and 1 high school. I did not go into substitute teaching for the money. However, I do appreciate earning some income, and my time is valuable. When I started teaching 16 years ago, substitutes were paid $75 a day. After 40 days, the pay was increased to $121. About 6 years ago, TUSD cut the long-term pay to $100. This year, substitutes are offered $92 a day, regardless of how many days they work. A person in the substitute office told me that if I worked 125 days this year, I would earn the same amount as I did working under last year's rates. In July, I was asked by one of my principals if I would take over the 5th grade class due to a sudden teacher resignation. I was told to expect to be at the school for 8 weeks and possibly longer. My new employer, ESI, told me my long-term pay would be $107 a day. I didn't find that acceptable. Our superintendent suggested working as an interim teacher, which might provide higher pay. It took HR 10 days and 2 emails from me to inform me that my payment for acting as a full-time teacher, creating lesson plans, grading papers, meeting parents, etc., would be $100 a day, less deductions for ASRA. Fast food workers earn more than this. I chose not to accept the position because I knew I would feel resentful for being paid so little for the amount of work required to be an effective teacher. This left my principal in a bind. I am passionate about education. I believe that a substitute teacher should be more than a babysitter. I know how to make school learning, and I know how to make school fun and how to teach children. I've also been in classrooms replacing long-term subs who were responsible for a disastrous learning environment. The Arizona Star reported that last year, TUSD had 4,100 unfilled teaching vacancies. No substitutes were available for those days. That doesn't surprise me. I would like to encourage members of the board to come up with alternative compensations for substitutes. Perhaps substitutes with more experience and good evaluations from their principals and teachers that they're subbing for should qualify for higher pay. I would be happy to serve on a committee to help come up with solutions that will work with this budget. Mrs. Grojava, I admire you for wanting to take care of the janitors and lunchroom staff, and I ask you to please consider us substitutes as well.
Thank you.
Very much.
Thank you. Lillian Fox, and that is my last card. If anyone else wishes to speak, please submit a yellow card.
My name's Lillian Fox. Hello, President Grojava, members of the board, superintendent, and counselor. He's the 4th very experienced TUSD long-term sub I've heard of who's turned down long-term subs to start the year. I think you have a problem. TUSD used to have about the most competitive pay for long-term, highly experienced subs in Tucson. It's now the worst. You're not competitive for long-term subs at all, and that needs to be reevaluated. I know the board wasn't told the ESA contract was going to cut sub pay, but it did. It wasn't just benefits. Now, one of the other problems the district has is you have a horrific number, a terribly large number of vacant positions, and this happens every year that you have a lot. This is not the best it's been in 5 years, but it doesn't matter. It's an awful number. Now, the rest of the districts in Tucson are very, very small, and so when you look at the number of vacancies they have, it looks like they're doing great. But when you adjust their vacancies for their size relative to TUSD, they're not real great, but TUSD is still the worst. Sunnyside is the next worst, but they're 20% better than you are. One of the things that's making you less competitive that human resources can do nothing about, it's something the superintendent and the board have to deal with, You have a lot of hard-to-fill positions, Ed, science, and math, that you're not filling. Other districts don't have as bad a problem as you do, because all TUSD offers is a $2,500 signing bonus. You get it for 1 year. And Human Resources knows this, but they don't have the money. They can't do anything about it. A number of the districts in Tucson, if you're an ex-ed teacher, a math or science teacher, they give you, depending on the position, anything from $2,000 to $4,000 a year the rest of your life, as long as you work for them. So you're just not competitive when teachers in those positions look at what other districts are paying. From almost every position that a teacher can take, TUSD actually pays a little bit better than the other Tucson districts, but when you look at the money that the other districts are paying their science, math, and ex-ed new hires, you're not competitive, and so that's why you have a problem. That's something the board ought to look seriously about fixing. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with no other cards, I'm going to go ahead and close the call to the audience and ask any board members if they wish to ask staff to respond to a criticism, or I'm sorry, wish to respond to a criticism made by those who've addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda.
Ms. Grijalva.
Mr. Juarez.
Dr. Sanchez, if you could provide some clarity, possibly a response to Mr. Youngerman's concerns. I mean, he mentioned 4,000 vacancies at one point. That seems awfully high.
Sure. So when you take a look at vacancies and you take a look at all the vacancies for any given day, we have 3,400 teachers roughly. And so if you take the entire year, 180 instructional days, you take a look at total vacancies, it's not on one day. And so in terms of total subs, as I mentioned earlier in superintendent's report, we at this point in time are paying more for short-term daily subs than we have in the past. At $92, we pay the $8 fee. Long-term subs, we pay $107. We also pay the additional fee on top of that, so it's $115. And currently we're 48 subs higher than our highest point last year. So the raise in the daily sub rate has helped us. And in terms of overall vacancies for subs, the first day of school, there were less than 14 classrooms where we didn't have a adult long-term sub, a teacher, or a short-term sub present, and so we were able to cover those with staff, and we continue to evaluate that. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other? Ms. Foster.
And to respond to Mr. Leva's comment about school performance, Dr. Sanchez, is it possible in our strategic plan, maybe how important it is for us as a district to tell our story and to help our teachers and our parents, our parents understand, because there's the Department of Education has their way that they measure, and then you have great schools that has their way that how they measure, and I think we really need to educate our parents on understanding the performance, because we have to appreciate that those other entities have different, there's an agenda to what they do, and our agenda being about true, accurate information for our parents to help them make informed decisions about the academics of each of our schools, I think needs to be a priority.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, the only thing I would like to ask is if, in the future, if we could reach out to someone like Ms. Schaefer when she's going to do those presentations. It's just 3 minutes is really not enough time, nor do we have an opportunity to ask questions. So it would be great maybe at the end of this school year if we could ask her and any other partners like that to come back and have an item so we can actually ask some questions.
Yes, ma'am. I'll ask Human Resources to put that on their calendar so that at the end of the year we're able to circle back around to that.
That would be great. Okay, thank you. Now we're on information items. Item 5, update on dual language advanced learning experience, ALES, and reading recovery. Dr. Sanchez.
Just one final point I wanted to just clarify. When I answered Mr. Juarez's question, those were class periods, not class days. So that's how many class periods were without a person, so not class days.
And how many class periods do we have in a year?
So, yeah, we'll do the math on that. So, all right.
Thank you.
All right. Next, we have our newly appointed, oldly appointed, dual language, advanced learning experience, and reading recovery. We have our leader, Mr. Alvarez, who was the former language acquisition director before becoming the principal of Monzo. Yeah. And so he's back for round 2. And it's always good to hear what the vision is moving forward, understanding that ALE is part of dual language, and dual language fits within that. And also, as I'd mentioned, one of the areas of support was reading recovery, and we have 12 teachers. So it's very important that we get a good understanding of what's going on with our 12 teachers and where they're going to be and what they're going to do and how we're going to really monitor success. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Alvarez.
All right. Good evening.
Ms. Grajava? Ms. Grajava?
I'm sorry, Mr. Hicks.
Our interpreter.
Oh, thank you. We didn't have anyone ask for interpreting services, so thank you very much. But you're free to go. Thank you for being here. Muchas gracias.
But it is raining, so.
It is raining, so feel free to stay here if you want, as long as you want. Thank you. Go ahead. I'm sorry,
All
Mr.
right.
Alvarez, please go ahead.
All right, so good evening,
Good evening.
President Grijalva, Dr. Sanchez, council, board members. This is an actual, something that's very dear to me. I went to Hollinger as a kid when it was a hybrid in the 70s of a bilingual model. Then I was fortunate enough to teach at Hollinger as a bilingual teacher for 12 years. And now I'm in this department. So I want to give you guys an update of things you might have already heard and the direction we want to be going this year. So we have our goal to provide instruction, cognitive and linguistic development in 2 languages for all students who enroll with the educational goals of bilingualism, biliteracy, and biculturalism. That's 2 languages we want to be doing simultaneously, and that's the 2-way dual language model. We have a brochure. This is a brochure that when we're in the feria de lectura, the book fair that Ms. Foster was attended, we gave away about 400 of these dual language brochures. We still had parents coming and asking, dual language is still legal in Arizona? Yeah. And I had to say, yes, it is. And it's going to be thriving in TUSD. So we're still with that, having to clarify that with parents. Now, our dual language model is basically a balanced number of 2 groups of students. We have native speakers of Spanish or the target language and native English speakers. In our dual language programs right now, 68% of dual language are mainstream students. So that also shows mainstream meaning regular ed students that are non-ELLs, which means there's a desire from parents to have their children in dual language. So when we looked up those figures, 68% are non-ELLs, mainstream students. Now the language of instruction, what we went towards was a 90-10 model. In kinder, 90% Spanish, in first grade all the way up to 4th grade, going towards more of a 50-50 model with time, meaning 50-50, reminiscent of some of the bilingual programs back in the day. This time is really to get that L1, that language 1, to really reinforce that with some of our native Spanish speakers and use those as anchors for language acquisition in the second language. Now, our participating sites for Cycle 1 for the two-way dual language were, we had K2, 6th grade, 9th grade. These are the different sites that we went with for Cycle 1. All the other grades at this time were doing a 50-50 model. So these were doing a 2-way dual language model, which had equal number of the languages represented. Now this year, we're rolling out Cycle 2, which is 3rd, 7th, and 10th. So we've already done some training for these schools and teachers, and we're going to continue with subsequent trainings with our principal at the sites. So these schools now will continue with that 2-way dual language model. All the other sites, which I think is still 4th and 5th grade, would be a 50-50 model. Now here's just in minutes, it's hard to see, but this is basically the breakdown, and we do have that in our dual language handbook that's available at the language acquisition website. So it's kind of hard to see. Basically the secondary level. Now our key areas for our program model, we have program resources, professional development. One thing that we're really looking at to really strengthen is our department walkthroughs, the use of technology, Promethean boards, how to use visuals, technology when it comes to instructing our dual language kids. Bilingual instructional resources, different books, different, we have Achieve 3000, we have Imagine Learning, so many things basically to fortify our program model. And Literacy Squared too, that also helps with oracy and reading and writing when it comes to teaching dual language. Right here we have a teacher in action, a picture from David Sonia Castellanos using the Literacy Squared coaching model and instructing our kids at Davis Elementary. Now, one of the new initiatives we want, because we have, our department has done a really nice job in the past of highlighting where they want to go. So what we want to do this year is, in addition to that, and take it to another level, is really look at strengthening some accountability systems that can be already threaded in what school sites already do. Every school site has a school-wide plan. Basically, everything that you do in that school should be reflected in that plan. So one thing we want to do this year, our department will help all dual language schools create SMART goals that address the goals and expectations of the dual language program, their school-wide plans. Now, this is a facilitative process. It won't be something we're making a SMART goal and just giving it to sites, but we'll work with the individual sites, see the makeup of their school. Every school has their culture and climate, and come out with some goals. But I did do an example of a goal here. We use Achieve 3000 in our sites, and it's a program that is in Spanish and English with non-informational items that's tied to Lexiles in Spanish and English. Now, it could be a goal that would be like this: build reading strength and stamina through closed reading of rigorous informational text and targeted scaffolding in both English and Spanish. And the action step would be utilizing the Achieve 3000 program. Every student will complete 40 sessions by the end of the first semester and a total of 80 sessions by the end of the second semester to gain more than a 2.5 times growth on their initial Lexile. So basically, if a child in baselines at 70 Lexile and 2.5, he's going near to 160 by the end of the year if they're consistent and they're checking and monitoring the usage of this great program. Now, we have different assessments as well. So we have our assessments K-12. We have a pre-post DRA, which is the developmental reading assessment that many schools use and used in the past. We're using that specifically with the dual language programs, and we also have its counterpart in Spanish ELD2 as well to measure reading, reading fluency and comprehension. Los Links is basically the Spanish Spanish fluency to mirror what is happening in Spanish development as well for our students, and Achieve 3000 as well, 2nd to 12th, to look at have them reading in both Spanish and English informational text and moving hopefully up through the Lexiles. So as I was thinking about this presentation, I was thinking of that movie, Build It and They Will Come, which was Field of Dreams. Now, build it and they will come is what we think, but that's not always the case. So when I was thinking of this, is build it and they will come. No, that's not really true. We need to continue to fortify the existing programs, monitor and adjust when we're out there doing our learning walks and seeing where dual language schools are at. Show success through data, market that success. So our goal as a department is to basically look at that implementation and look at address that implementation. We'll continue to collaborate with HR to establish recruitment programs with incentives for bilingually endorsed teachers in the elementary, secondary, and exceptional education teachers to really fortify who is in front of our kids delivering best practices when it comes to bilingualism and dual language. Again, we recruit, place gifted, proficiently bilingual endorsed teachers, incentives, and recruit and place eligible students. Our other goal is to monitor these schools. We cannot just give them things and say, here you go for it, build a great program. There has to be some monitoring there so that we can know how to support our schools. So we want to make sure that we use our sheltered instructional, that they're using SIOP strategies, which are structured instructional strategies. And we'll do this on a quarterly basis to be able to get a barometer where the schools are at so that we can support the principals at their school sites. And we'll continue to do that, monitor and adjust, basically using Imagine Learning, what they're doing there, Achieve 3000, and the SIOP strategies. Our other goal is to become data rich, not just have a bunch of data that we just fling around and we don't analyze it and monitor and adjust or make any modifications to instruction. We want to look at everything that we do with pre and post assessments with DRA, look at lost links, look at the Spanish component, Achieve 3000, that will be used on a weekly basis. In addition, we're using district benchmarks and state assessments will also be used to monitor just the growth of the program. Now, I pulled this up. I looked at a few years back, from 12-13 to 14-15, and what I did was I pulled some of the aims that was a couple of years ago. Last year, we don't have Arizona merit scores, and we all know the headlines about that this morning. So last year, what we did have, though, was ATI benchmarking that our dual language students did take. So this is, right now, from 12-13, we're able to see that our dual language kids, or kids in the dual language program, were still outperforming mainstream kids or regular ed. You know, not a lot, but it's there. And the writing, it was basically a wash because everyone, that's one initiative that I guess as a district we're looking at strengthening the writing component. But in math and reading, our dual language kids, our kids in dual language programs still outperform our mainstream, which is very, very important to the public when they say, I want my kid in dual language, but are they gonna lose their academic mastery in English? And well, this is the answer that no. They're also gaining literacy and still doing well in the English test. And then we want to market a two-way dual language program. That's another goal of the department. We need to be very present at U of A, TUSD teacher recruitment fairs, conferences, book fairs, literacy events. We want to use newspaper, print media, social media, everything that's up there to make sure that everyone knows about our dual language programs. Teachers in action, principals in action, and school sites of dual language in action. That way they see that. So we want to make sure that we're the literacy fairs and using all the different things. Then I put down there, then they will come. If we do all this stuff, I do believe that they will come. So I do have some good news here. We looked at some of the, in answering some of the decline in enrollment in our dual language programs. What I wanted to see was also, we also had a decline in enrollment district-wide. So I wanted to see what the correlation was to dual language participation in dual language as compared to our drop in overall district numbers in our district. And it's basically, it shows there that we've stayed at least 5% of our kids have been in dual language programs. We did drop to 4% last year, but it's basically 0.1% off. But we've still maintained, even though we've had a drop in enrollment, we've had the percentage, when you correlate that, we've had it stayed in the 5%. 5% of our kids are choosing dual language. We wanted more, of course, but you know, that's where we're at right now. Now, this is the good news. I did a count as of 8/5, which was just the other day. Yeah. We have 2,200 students right now in dual language, which you want to see, 14-15, we had 2,163. So right now, we have more kids in the 4th day, and we get more after the 40th day than our end of the year numbers in dual language 14-15. So that looks promising, you know, that we are going for the first time in many years, in 5 years, that we're actually looking at a positive growth with dual language with all the great work that they've done in my department before I was here. So great stuff. So we're really excited about that, and we're really excited about what 40th days we're going to get. So we're going to continue the program implementation. Again, we have our challenges that we know about, recruitment of bilingual education endorsed teachers that we want to look at as a department, as a district, to incentivize that position and be very present at these different fairs and conferences. Also, our advanced learning experience. We worked in collaboration with the director from ALE and the GATE coordinator to look at more recruitment for Hollinger and Pister. And then we did more parent outreach, and we did increase that number at Hollinger of amount of kids that joined the self-contained GATE program, which is bilingual, by about 40 students.
That's great.
And then we continue to collaborate to have a dual language GATE pullout as an advanced learning experience for our kids, dual language, and mainstream pullout GATE to support Spanish dominant ELLs. So now so that's the dual language portion. So we're very excited about it. I'm very excited being a bilingual teacher for 12 years that this is something I feel very comfortable with going out there and making sure I support our schools, our principals, our sites, and make sure we market a program that is really good, that makes our students biliterate and something everyone knows is of value in a global society. So this is a new initiative we're very, very excited about, is reading recovery. For those of you that have ever, well, most of us are in education, we know that one thing that our kids are missing early on is pre-literacy skills. They come in sometimes at a deficit because of lack of experiences that they have to print and just those experiences they just do not come with. So we have to do a lot of catch-up work at the sites. Believe me, I know that. Just experiencing that just last year. We do a lot of catch-up at the sites, and we have to train our teachers to look at those early literacy fundamental strategies to catch up our kids. So it was great that the district is going in this way. We have reading recovery, reactivation. We're the only ones in Arizona that have this, and we're part of a unique group that does have this in the United States. So it's headed by Deanna Brennan, that's sitting right there. Right, Deanna? And now she already has picked, well, they picked these different schools that they're going to have this program at.
We're the only reading recovery program in Arizona?
In Arizona.
Wow.
Yeah, Arizona. Yeah. Yeah.
State.
Mr. Alvarez, can you repeat that just so
Yeah.
it's part
So
of the record?
we are out of 1,300 districts, right? Throughout the United States. So we're in that very unique network
Yeah.
of districts in the United States that has this program, and the only ones in Arizona. So that's very, very exciting, because again, it does, the model basically is working with students in the class, a cohort group of students, moving those kids, but also being very influential. It's in the first grade, very influential to that not only that teacher, but that first grade team. And now with the initiatives of the PLCs that the district's going, it works it works perfectly with what we're doing. Everything's working in tandem with each other. So systemically, it's a perfect time for this. So reading recovery training has begun. You see teachers there. We see behind the glass is what we're going to be doing. A very important strategy is reading recovery and literacy. And again, being bilingual, the world is in your hands. El mundo en sus manos, siendo bilingüe. And thank you.
Ms. Corrales.
Mr. Hicks.
Well, I'd like to applaud what you and your staff are doing. It's a great job.
Oh, thank you.
I do have two questions. Are there plans to bring dual language to more central and east side schools? I've noticed all the schools that are on there are west side.
Yeah, so what we're looking at is when we're looking at fortifying the programs. At the same time, we're looking at really at sites that we may be able to have that. What we do have is in the world languages, we're really looking at that world language option to make sure that we have some different languages in those sites as well. So eventually we're looking at site by site, trying to really strengthen the programs. That way, it's a program that the public wants to put their children in.
So we're going to, that was leading into my second question, which is the other languages such as French, Mandarin.
Yeah.
All of those ones that
of course, the dominant language is still Spanish, but we really want to look at those options of adding those languages inside, a school as a strand. Absolutely.
Yeah, if we're looking at a global society, it's not just English and Spanish, it's German, it's
I agree,
French,
yeah.
it's, so, okay, Chinese.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh.
One of the concerns that I have, and I think that as a parent of a child who was in dual language and isn't anymore, is the continuum. So when we have schools that start K-3 and then are no other options, if that's a program that you want, you have to seek it elsewhere outside of the school that you're already at. So I'm hoping that there's going to be, once these schools are selected, that we can continue to expand the dual language options at different schools so it doesn't cut off. And schools that have it, like Pister, that's something that parents who are going to put their children in that school can rely on the fact that it is going to be dual language every grade, and not, be worried that it's going to be cut off at the 6th or cut off at the 8th. And I think that that's really important for stability for parents who are looking for options for their children. That because really, we're very happy with the school that my children are at, but dual language is something that we would have moved, to make sure that
absolutely.
they have that
And one of the
option.
things we're being very proactive is looking and making sure that for middle school like Pittsburgh, we went and visited. I even helped register some kids over there to make sure that we sold dual language as an ALE, advanced learning experience. But one of the things we really want to look at keeping these programs pure in those schools so that we do have a systemic, flow, a pipeline. We want to create a real pure pipeline for our dual language.
And
Absolutely.
I'm glad, and I was really glad to hear that you've had a boost in numbers at Hollinger, because it is the only dual language GATE program in Arizona, and
Yeah.
we just really don't tout that enough.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that
Yeah.
we should be flying all over the place.
And Pueblo
That
High
is
School as well. Just in a couple of days, they rose like by 50 or 60 kids. It was amazing.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Ms. Foster.
And with that, I don't want to put you on the spot for a number when you think about the SMART goals, right?
Yeah.
And if we have 5%, but what percent are we shooting for next year? So just, I'd like to know what percent, if we went down to 4, and so, that is a concern.
Absolutely.
And I was glad to see that right now, as of the 4th day, we're on the right track. But what percentage is the department's goal to have by next year? Or the year after that? I just think we need to, when we think about those SMART goals, what
Absolutely, and I
percentage?
think
And
a
again,
lot
I
of
don't
it's-
want you to just raise, throw out 10 or 8 or something right now, but I'd like to know the number we're shooting for.
Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. The reason I asked Mr. Alvarez to present early on is this is an area where TUSD once had the spotlight nationwide. And so we want that spotlight nationwide again. DLL, which is under language acquisition, was developed here. Descubriendo la Lectura was developed here in TUSD. So we're positioned well moving forward. And my request of the board is any ideas, suggestions, thoughts that you have, please send them my way. And as we began doing the same type of curriculum work in our dual language area as we have with our general monolingual curriculum and core content areas, we'd love to get the board's feedback on that. So we encourage and ask the board to send that our way. And when we come back, we'd like to share the SMART goals that are written by the Language Acquisition Department in each of those areas.
Thank you. Dr. Stegman.
So you said the reading recovery program is very rare in Arizona. How many?
There's none in Arizona.
Right,
We're the only
unique.
ones.
So could you explain exactly what is it that makes it unique? I was talking with a superintendent this morning who's dealing with reading deficiency issues, and they have programs to deal with that. So what is the particular thing in our program that defines it and that we can say no one else is doing it in Arizona?
Well, it's actually a program. It's reading recovery is actually a program created. The strategies within it are early literacy skills. So basically, you're working 1 to 4, one-on-one with a child, really looking at every single reading, where they're at with reading, and looking at the strategies. Really looking at the child and seeing where their targets are. If they're missing initial sounds, if they're missing just fluency, different things of that nature, and really having a targeted approach, because they're also going to be getting college credit, university credit on all these strategies. So a lot of it is basic, just really monitoring just the use of different reading strategies with each child.
So that's like a trademark, reading recovery. That's a specific.
It's a program. It's a program, yeah.
Okay.
Definite program, yeah.
Okay.
Ms.
Dr.
Calvo?
Sanchez.
And so when you think of a program, you think of something that is rote, and it's something that's in the box, and it's something that is very defined. That's not the case with what we're looking at. We're really looking at fluency, comprehension. It's a very detailed and in-depth program where you take each individual student, you map out that student's individual literacy learning gaps, and you create a very specific approach to close those individual student learning gaps. And so it's a very comprehensive process. So it wouldn't be like a program where you buy something and you have worksheets. It's very individual. It's tailored to individual students. It's highly customized, and it's focused on very specific data points that are monitored at a high level. So my invitation to the board would be to view some of the training that occurs, and Mr. Alvarez can get the dates out, because it is very in-depth and detailed. It's quality instruction and very well research informed.
Ms. Foster.
And if I could just take a point of privilege, Dr. Stegman, with the pendulum in education, we had whole language, and then we went away from whole language to pure phonics. And then this, for all of us that have been in education, this is going back to what the holistic view of learning how to read and child-centered. And so for those of us that have been in education for so long, it is really going back to what we know, what was working, that when the pendulum shifted away, that we're able to bring back to our, and so it's a highly, highly well-respected program that actually has its beginnings at the University of Arizona with Ken and Yetta Goodman. So,
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Alvarez.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, now we're on consent agenda, item 6. Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to ask certain administrators to come forward because I'd like to clarify a few items on the consent agenda, some very impressive items at that. So on item G, I'd like to ask Ms. Gallegos to come forward to provide the grant amount for Davison and Wheeler with the Arizona Department of Education and how it ties into our pre-K programs on those sites. So Ms. Gallegos, if you'll come forward on that item. The other item I'm going to ask that we touch on is the bioscience, biotechnology. So I'm going to ask Mr. McCollum to come forward and provide a bit of information on the bioscience and biotechnology. And I'm also going to ask Mr. Duncan or Mr. Nodine to come forward about Constellation Solar. And if we can begin with those three, so we'll just take them one at a time.
Okay.
So, and Ms. Engel, if you're here also with Ms. Gallegos, that's perfect.
Good afternoon. Good evening, President Grijalva, board members.
Do we have sound
is your
on?
microphone on?
you have to use your teacher voice with
No.
the rain.
We want to make sure it's
Good
being
afternoon.
Do we have the mic on?
I think it's on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. President Grijalva, board members. There it is. I have asked Maura Clark Engel, our Director of Exceptional Ed, to come here with me to help explain the grant that we were awarded. And actually, this grant has already been in place in TUSD, but it was reinstated. So, Maura?
Great, thank you.
President Grijalva, board members, Dr. Sanchez, legal counsel, thank you for this opportunity. This is my first. Here I go. I'm very excited to talk about preschool. Anytime we get a chance to talk about it, it's pretty fabulous, and the things that are happening in TUSD are really exciting with preschool. I brought Penny Natvig up with me, who is the program coordinator of the preschool programs, since I've only been here about 30 days, just in case there's a question that I might not know. I have a little bit of backup. We have two schools. We have Davidson and Wheeler, who have been part of a grant through the Arizona Department of Education to provide funding, to provide scholarships for typical peers to be placed in special education preschool programs. It's really been a great opportunity for us because typically our ABLE classrooms and our special education classrooms are made up just of that, students with special education services who have been identified with a disability. This allows for tuition-free placement, and this year it will be 26 students who can be placed in these two programs to provide that modeling for students with disabilities, that chance for students with disabilities to learn from their peers, because we know oftentimes they learn better from their peers than they learn from us, and they have an opportunity to be together in a great learning experience and environment and be taught by a certified teacher in that classroom. So it's been a very, very exciting program. We're seeing a little bit of a decrease in the funding that we're getting from the state over the course of the years, this year being the least amount of spots that we have available. We anticipate that will continue over the course of time, but we're just excited to take advantage and be able to have those typical peers in the classroom to really increase the learning of all the students.
Thank you.
And I would just like to add that how this is aligned to the rest of our programs. As you remember, this past month in July, we were given permission to start with a pilot of 5 preschool programs that are actually integrated programs with typical peers, and then integrating our students with disabilities. So this is how we see an extension and complementing the programs that we are already establishing.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Yes, Dr. Sanchez.
Okay, just wanted to provide that bit of information as this is a positive piece. And so if there aren't any questions, I'd like to ask Mr. McCollum to address the bioscience and biotechnology quickly.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
President Grijalva, members of the board, Dr. Sanchez, Council Tolleson. The biotechnology programs that we have are part of our career technical education department. They currently are located at both Tucson High and Pueblo High School, and we have 7 sections at Tucson High taught by Dr. Margaret Welch and Jeremy Jonas, and then 5 sections at Pueblo High School taught by Dr. Andrew Lettuce. Those instructors are premier instructors. This is a premier program, one that we're very, very proud of at TUSD. The intergovernmental agreement that we're speaking about tonight has been in place for over 5 years. It works with the Bio 5 department at the University of Arizona. There are 4 main functions that this IGA provides for us. One, supplies. In bioscience, we purchase supplies that are very consumable, have a short shelf life, and we only use minute portions of it at a time. Without Bio 5, we would be purchasing it in much greater quantities, and it would spoil, to be quite honest with you, and we would not be able to get it here in time. Bio 5 helps us with those type consumable products that our bioscience programs need. It also helps us with a graduate assistant. So through the program, we have a graduate assistant from the U of A who is able to come to our programs at Tucson High and Pueblo and work with our kids at specific experiments that they're doing. That is really unheard of around town, but a real great plus for our kids. The third component that we offer our students is credit. Now, they do have to pay for the credit, and we do get some funding through Pima County One Stop and the YCC grant that helps our students be able to afford it, but it is a really cut rate so that our kids can earn credit. They are recommended by their instructor based on their academic achievement in the class, and then are able to get U of A credit in bioscience over at the University of Arizona. This agreement, again, has been in place for at least 5 years. We do pay for it. There is an expense for it, and we do so out of our Perkins funding.
Mr. Hicks.
The biosciences that's going on over at the University High in Rincon, are we looking at expanding this over to there?
Okay, right now, we look to expand it to the east side. Right now, we have it on the west side, so we look at equity to move the program over on the east side. At this time, I'm not seeing that University High has a bioscience program associated with our career and technical education program.
Right. No, they don't. They have a science program that they're doing this type of work. I'm asking if we're going to be looking at bringing that over.
Yeah, we want to move central and east side, and university would be a site we would consider if we can we want to reach a large amount of students. We want this to be available for our kids not only on the west side but the east side. So we are looking at specific sites of where we can accomplish that, where it's not going to be in competition with the other sites near it.
Okay. Do you have a cost on this, approximately?
An approximate cost is about $25,000, $25,000 for all of our programs. Right now we have seven sections of bioscience at Tucson High. We have 5 sections of bioscience at Pueblo.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
All right, and then the final item that I wanted to provide a bit of information on is the Constellation Solar Arizona LLC authorization. This is very exciting and positive for us, as TUSD was identified as the #2 district in the nation for renewable energy usage, and so this further builds on that. And so, Mr. Duncan.
What we brought this evening is the easement piece. So
pull up the microphone, sir.
Is the easement piece that goes with this for them to be able to maintain and do the work that they have to do. Yeah, that is their equipment that's on it, so we have to give them the right. So really, it's kind of a progressive piece The communications pieces, the working with the schools, working with the community, all those things have already gone in the past with the planning. So this is at the very end where we're trying to coordinate to make sure these easements are taking place so that NPE and the other people can get on to the property in the future as a right to be able to get to their equipment, their equipment on our property. That's the piece that we're talking about this evening, just to cut it to the chase, and so you know.
Any questions, Dr.
Thank you.
Sanchez?
All right.
Okay.
So those are the items. I just wanted to provide a bit of, I think Dr. Stigman had a question.
Sure.
All the ones I think.
Did anyone have a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. What were the, could you list the schools?
If I can remember right, it's Banks, Johnson, Lawrence, VC, and Valencia.
Okay.
Those 5? The ones that we had tied into TRICO.
Right. That's it.
Anything else?
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you. Any other questions?
One last question. Obviously, we've gone out and we've had community conversations already about this and about placement and all that. Is that something that we've already have well documented in case there's any additional concerns?
Absolutely. Inclusive of, we made the change about a year ago to phase 2 and the end of phase 1 to make certain things, an extensive amount of communication went out. That took place with these 5 schools. We also communicated when we had changeover of different principals.
Sure.
Just to make sure they knew what was going on.
Excellent.
Because that'll happen, then we need to make sure that they kind of know. Because that's been an issue as best too, is they don't know what a past principal has approved
Absolutely.
with their site council. So
And we have, I mean, just from recollection from those sites, we have a lot more space out in those areas where we won't have any of the issues that had come up before, correct?
Correct.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.
Good job out there, too.
Okay. Dr. Sanchez?
Mr. Grijalva, I'd like to recommend the consent agenda with that information as presented for
Okay.
approval.
Ms.
Thank you.
Grijalva?
Yes, Mr. Juarez?
I'd like to pull item N, please, before we move forward with that.
I'm sorry, which one?
Item N as in
N,
Nancy.
as in Nancy, okay.
So moved, the rest of the...
I'm sorry, Mr. Hicks?
I was going to ask for N too, but I'd like to ask for M to be pulled.
as in Mary.
Just for, as in
M as
Mary.
in Mary.
Just for clarification.
All right.
Sure.
Any other? Dr. Stegeman?
T.
T as in Tom.
Holy
Okay.
moly. Big one.
All right, any other? Okay, so we have, can I ask for a motion for the rest of the consent agenda?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Ms. Foster moved and Mr. Hicks seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Item passes. Item number M, Mr. Hicks.
I'd just like to know on this, what is the cost of this? If we have an approximate cost?
Sure.
Dr. Sanchez.
Mr. Stark, are you available to address the question on item M on the cost for Medicaid Direct services? What percentage do they take of the overall amount that they recover through billing? It's a longer walk now.
We need theme music.
But it's not the walk of shame.
Thank you. President Grijalva, governing board members, Dr. Sanchez, Council Tolson. The agreement that Public Consulting Group has with the state outlines what the cost is. So the Public Consulting Group is actually a third-party provider. The agreement that we're signing with the Public Consulting Group doesn't specify a specific amount, and those arrangements were made with the state. So the state will be compensating the Public Consulting Group for whatever services they provide related to the reimbursement of the Medicaid and access costs. So that information I don't have.
So that's not, we're not paying, the state's paying for this?
Correct. We're getting a reimbursement from the state for the services that we provide to certain students under the agreement, and the state is under contract with the Public Consulting Group. So that's who we go through to get reimbursed from the state.
We go through the state or we go through the group?
We go through the public consulting group.
Who then goes to the state?
They act as the third-party provider for the state, and the state did a competitive process and awarded the public consulting group the ability to perform that service.
So there's no percentage that they make off of the TUSD in regards to doing this, fulfilling this?
There's not a direct percentage they make off of TUSD, but I imagine that built inside the RFP that the state, the contract that the state negotiated with the public consulting group, there is some compensation in there. I'm unaware of what that compensation is.
But it's coming this way, not our way.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, Dr. Stegeman?
But we are, I mean, the Medicaid funds are federal, correct? They come through the state, but it represents federal assistance, or am I wrong about that?
You know, the details of the Medicaid funds is something that I'm not knowledgeable about, but if you needed that information, I'm sure we could find that out.
Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, they are federal funds. So in Arizona, it's different than in other places. In other places, districts directly hire a consulting group like PCG. They take a percentage, and that's agreed upon in the whole RFP process. And so, in essence, we provide speech therapy, we provide motor skills, motor movement therapy. We provide quite a bit that qualifies for Medicaid reimbursement. And so, in other places where the district works directly with a contractor like PCG, you agree on that percentage, you send them the logs of all the minutes and the amount of time and services you provide to students. They then bill Medicaid, fill out all the paperwork, it's federal money. You get that money back, they take a percentage off the top. So if you direct contract with them, that's how it works. In Arizona, it's different in that the state is the one that negotiates the contract. So the state pays them, and we are the beneficiaries of what we get, what the state gets reimbursed for the services we provide. So we log and document the services we provide. For example, our speech therapists keep a log, they turn it in, that's submitted to the state. PCG then takes all that information, they bill Medicaid, Medicaid then reimburses the state of Arizona. Arizona then takes whatever percentage it's going to give to PCG, they send the district the rest, and so that's held in a reserve fund that then is distributed out as needed for exceptional education services, and so that's the difference in how it works in Arizona.
Dr. Stegeman.
But we are not obliged, I mean, I understand this vendor's on a state contract, but we're not obliged by the state to use this vendor, or are we? Is there a law or regulation that says every district uses this vendor?
You know, I think this is the vendor that was awarded by the state, and so
we all go through it.
They went through a competitive process, and they were awarded. PCG was awarded the contract, so it's you know, my belief that that's who we have to use to get the reimbursement.
I mean, in most areas, we don't have to go off state contract if we don't want to. Or you're saying this is an exception to that?
I think that PCG is acting as a subcontractor of the state of Arizona. So the relationship is not one where we get a choice in who we use. I think it's.
But then why are we entering a contract with them if they're subcontracting with the state? Why is this even step necessary?
There's an agreement that we do have to fill out, even with a third-party provider. It's fairly common when you do have a third-party provider to have a subsequent agreement.
Do you know how many districts, what percentage of the districts use this specific provider for Medicaid services?
You know, I would assume that everybody who is seeking some kind of reimbursement from the state for these services has to use this particular provider.
Dr. Sanchez.
Mr. Stark just stated what I was going to state.
Okay.
So this is an agreement that the state puts forward, and it's like AZ Merit. We give the assessment, or it's like the SAIS system, the SACE system. This is who the state's going with, and it's the one that they've contracted with, and eventually we all have to migrate to it. So this one
we don't sign our own contract.
Just
Sorry,
a moment.
excuse me.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
So on this one, it's a matter of function and documentation for Medicaid reimbursement, and so we are an entity that has to agree that this PCG, on behalf of the state and the district, will secure Medicaid funds and is documented as such by the federal government. So for their reporting purposes, we have to go on record for signing on this. If we don't go on record for signing on this, then all of the Medicaid reimbursement opportunity we would have, we surrender.
Okay. Dr. Stegman, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, that wasn't exactly what I heard, So you're saying that the state requires us to use this vendor, or the federal, they will not issue us the federal funds? Is that what you're
If we don't use this vendor.
Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. If we don't use this vendor, this is a vendor the state has put forward. If we don't use this vendor, in terms of coming back to the governing board and exploring whether or not we want to do an RFP for this, pursue this, get our percentage for this, at this point, we're not legally allowed to do that. So,
I mean, that would be unique. I mean, that would be a very unusual legal framework. I mean, we don't contract independently with AZ Merit, right? They subcontract the state. So it's unusual, but
Do you have a concern about,
I always have a concern about cost minimization.
right,
Yeah,
no,
I have a concern generally with sole source state contracts, especially if we haven't bid them. Was this our previous vendor?
You know, I believe the state contract was competitively bid. I believe there was a competitive process, and other vendors had an opportunity to respond to the state solicitation, and you know, they went through a evaluation, and they awarded to a vendor. We're doing the due diligence on this particular contract to make sure that, you know, it was done properly. But you know, I wouldn't think that the state would have gone through a process that and made an award on a process that was not properly done.
so should this item not pass, we as a district, do we have the opportunity to then go to the state for us to ask for reimbursables? Can we go to the federal government, or is this the only avenue that we have?
To the best of my knowledge, this is the contracted vendor that the state has put forward to go through the reimbursement process. If there's another method to do that, I'm unaware of it, but that doesn't mean it may not exist.
Okay. And so is there an opportunity for us to research that and bring it back, or is this something that's timely that we're accumulating bills today?
Let me ask Ms.
Or is it something that can be done retroactive? So if we don't vote on this item until our next governing board meeting, when you can get more information about this, will that put us in a position?
Ms. Engel had her hand
As a
up, so I'd
negative.
like to ask her if she
Yes.
can address the question.
Great, thank you.
I am not sure that I can answer a lot more. It is something that we have to build through, and I do know that. We do have a program coordinator with exceptional ed, and her name is Jules O'Haron. She was here tonight. I don't think she realized that this was actually on the agenda, but we could definitely get more clarification. She does all of the billing for exceptional ed. Our related service providers do that, and all the billing goes through this company and then goes to the state, is my understanding. But I can get all of that information for you and bring that to the board and make sure that you have that.
I'll pull the item, Ms. Grijalva, until we're able to get clarity on this to see if this is the only vendor available to us, or if we can put out an RFP, go through the process, hire our own vendor, and see if we I don't know how we would know if we'd get a better rate than what the state's getting. I don't think we would know that.
And that's really, I mean, my issue isn't so much wanting to go through that process. I just wanted to make sure that there seemed to be some questions about it. I personally don't have an issue with voting the item, and I want to make sure that it doesn't put the district in a position where we are expending funds that we're expecting reimbursement for and may or may not get if this item doesn't pass. I'm just asking for some clarification around that point. And so before you pull the item, I'd like to make sure that, you know, we can answer whatever questions are kind of looming, if we can do that today. And if not, you know,
I'll pull the item and we'll bring it back. And at this point, I don't believe we'll lose out on any ability to send information in. And so in the end, the question will come back. The question will have to come back to the board. Otherwise, this board is surrendering Medicaid reimbursement.
Again, Dr. Sanchez, the question is whether we, at this point, are collecting bills that can go through this process And are we putting the district in a position, a precarious position, where we may not be able to be reimbursed for those expenses if we don't pass the item? Is
No,
this
ma'am.
something that can be done retroactive? And that's the only question I have. Again,
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I have an issue specifically with this. I just want to make sure that, Dr. Stegeman's concerns about sole source, all of those issues are addressed publicly.
We'll address them publicly, and so I'll bring it back in September. I don't believe it'll put us at a disadvantage, and if it does, I'll notify the board, and we'll put it on the workshop agenda and change that meeting agenda, but at this point in time, I don't believe it does. Ms. Soto?
Good evening, President Grijalva, members of the board. I just wanted to provide a point of clarification. We do submit those reports, the reimbursement reports, on a quarterly basis. So finance does get involved in gathering the actual data, based on the roster that's put together with the qualifying staff that provide the services to the students. So we gather the data and we report it every quarter. So we just signed off on the last quarter being last fiscal year. So the next report would be done through the end of September. I do believe we have some time, but again, we want to be able to tell PCG that we want to continue with the services that they provide. I have not seen an exact billing that they bring back to the district. However, I believe they do take their amount from the amount that's due back to the district, but we can certainly gather the information as far as how much they were compensated for their services. And they are contracted through the state of Arizona and Access.
Okay, Dr. Stegeman, then Ms. Foster,
Yeah,
then
and
Mr. Hicks, then Mr. Juarez.
Yeah, so just a couple more points. I appreciate your comments about state contract, which is totally true, but we know that the state contract process works better sometimes than other times. We know that it tends to work best for simple products, and this is a very long contract and not a simple product, and we know that in part it's designed to help smaller districts who can't practically afford to do their own process. And larger districts can sometimes do better than state contract, that, because it's worth their while to go through a process. I have no idea what this market is like. I think it would be interesting to know what our 10 largest peer districts, if they all use this vendor, then that would be a good sign, but at least I think it'd be interesting to know what our peer districts are doing.
Ms. Foster.
Well, I just wanted to ask pretty much for the same thing. I mean, are we raising some crazy red flag here that's not even a red flag to raise? Is this what other districts across the state are doing, the same way that we're moving towards, like you talked about SACE, and I know that the vendor for the new data system at ADE, they're just things that we're a part of, and we don't need to run red flags if this is where we're all moving.
And when Mr. Starr referred to the state, what we're referring to is the Arizona Department of Education that has already contracted with PCG, and they have certain criteria for LEAs to enter into this agreement, being those local education agencies. So they are a preferred vendor of ADE and Access. So it's not a state contract per se that we're used to seeing, that the state awards several contracts. They're already on contract with those two entities.
Mr. Hicks.
I'm good.
Mr. Juarez.
This district is probably one of the few districts in our region that provides a level of services to our students with special needs, specifically this population that we're talking about. I mean, you say that we have time before our next quarterly report, but if there, I'm not quite clear, but I guess it would be beneficial to have additional information. But nonetheless, the one thing that I don't want to do is clearly hurt our budget, but more importantly, hurt the students that are benefiting from these services. Mm-hmm. So I, for one, would much rather vote and move forward with this item and then look at it retroactively if we needed to. But if the idea is that we're just going to pull the item, let's just go ahead and do that. But I just do not want to hurt our students. And I appreciate Dr. Stegeman's steadfastness with looking at these sole source contracts, but it seems like this is pretty common practice, and that not necessarily say that common practice is always the right way to do it, but it sounds to me like all the other districts are benefiting from this relationship through this third party.
Dr. Stegeman.
I wanted to make a little bit of an apology. Normally, I try to give staff a heads up and ask these questions in advance, but the consent agenda is long, and this time I did not do that, so this line of questions is a little bit of a surprise, and I'm sorry about that. I just hadn't sort of focused on that particular item on the consent agenda, and that's my fault. And I think that I'll just to respond to Mr. Juarez briefly, I think that sometimes we can do better by not doing exactly what everyone else does. And I think we've got another item on the consent agenda that we just passed where we've rebid our stop-loss insurance and considerably reduced our premium. I mean, I know that because I was on that committee. And we're doing that by doing something that not everyone else does, but it's going to save us money. And so it's good to think out of the box sometimes. I don't know if that's true in this case, but.
Dr. Sanchez.
Again, reiterating that I'm comfortable with PCG, but I'll pull the item to make sure that the board has the information that was requested tonight. And so Mr. Stark will gather all that information. We'll send it to the board as soon as we have it, which will be more than likely in our Friday report to the board.
Great.
And it'll be on the agenda for the September regular board meeting.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Juarez, you pulled item N.
Yes, ma'am. And I'll try to be as clear as I can on this. There's 3 steps that I want to look at in explaining item N. The benefits of this MOU, as I've read it, are pretty expansive. I think it's affecting a national policy that we're looking at in terms of providing health care to all Americans. Last year, I was present, as well as Dr. Sanchez, at an event at Tucson High that was extremely successful in enrolling folks in a lot of different options for affordable health care. This coalition, enrollment coalition, if you will, around the county, some of the partners are United Way, Pima Community Access Program, a lot of the navigator agencies, and of course, Enroll America, which is an effort to try to get folks enrolled. With the upcoming enrollment, this item made it onto our agenda here, and so this effort is to educate community and assist folks in getting enrolled in affordable health care, which includes a lot of our families and some of our staff, a lot of our staff, in fact. So I wanted to provide this as a full disclosure that my wife's organization, Enroll America, is a partner with the Pima County Enrollment Coalition. So I wanted to provide some clarity on this vote because I don't want anybody to think that we're doing anything shady. So there's no financial gains from this MOU, is my understanding, and there's no cost to the district, as I understand correctly. So I would like to ask council for some legal advice to see if there's any opposition to me voting on this item.
Ms. Tolleson.
Thank you, President Grijalva. Mr. Juarez, the conflict of interest statute regarding folks who sit on public boards like this one really talks about not voting on contracts in which the member or a family member has a substantial interest, which the statute defines as something of a pecuniary nature. Though I would say, and our conflict policy uses some pretty similar language. It kind of goes back to that mantra about it sets the floor at contracts involving something of a financial gain, a prospect for financial gain. From a best practices perspective, you got a family member as the signatory on the other side from the district, and my recommendation, because agreements can always give rise to disputes,
of course,
is that it would be a better practice not to, but I don't think it's statutorily prohibited.
Okay.
Okay.
So with that, I follow your advice, and I believe that again, there's no financial gain, but there's much more of a benefit to this. But because of the political climate surrounding the Affordable Care Act and the climate in our community, I believe that there is no reason for me not to vote on this item. Again, I think the item is good for our community, and it's good for the families and members of our local district community. So I'm going to be voting on this item.
Okay. So can I get a motion?
Ms.
Oh, Mr. Hicks.
So there's no cost to this?
Dr. Sanchez.
No, there's not any cost to this. Basically, what we're doing is we're allowing access to our site. And if there's anything that needs to be covered in terms of custodial, whatever, they're obligated to address that. So there's no cost. It's just allowing them to come in to set up. And the only thing we're providing is a space.
Okay, in clarity, do we do this for other organizations?
When we have an MOU with other organizations, we do. So it's just a matter of the nature of the MOU.
So we're not, so if the Marines wanted to come in and set up a table? Or
Yes, sir.
Army?
We allow that.
Okay.
They currently do that.
Okay, I'm just bringing it out.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Colleges, all kinds of people.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, any other discussion? Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Juarez?
Yes.
Dr. Stegeman?
Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, thank you. Okay, now we're on item T. Dr. Stegman.
Item T is the approval of 31 sets of minutes, the minutes for 31 board meetings. And I don't usually read the proposed minutes in detail. I sort of skimmed through them. This was prodigious. But the first set on May, I just want to see whether they generally conform to my recollection. On May 7th, there's a vote that I think is incorrectly recorded. I went back to the tape and listened to the tape, and the motion that is listed as passing failed. And so I would just say we ought to go back and check that. It was a personnel item. It wasn't a huge thing. I just think the minutes as presented aren't quite correct for May 7th. I'd be prepared to move the other 30 meetings if we could, hold May 7th back.
Okay,
Be sure that's right.
Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes of all the governing board meetings listed under T except for May 7th.
So T 2 through 31.
2 through 31, yeah, that was the first one.
Okay.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Item passes. Okay.
So will we bring
Thank you.
back May 7th?
Yes, we can bring back May 7th at our next meeting. Mr. Hicks seconded. I apologize. I'll go ahead and summarize that because we're kind of far apart now. You can't really see us as easily. Okay, so now we're on item 7, action items, administrative appointments, reassignments, and transfers. Principal of University High School, Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to recommend as our new principal for University High School, Ms. Amy Sislak.
I'd like to move the item.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Item passes.
Amy.
Next, item number 8, Assistant Principal, Miller Elementary School, Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to recommend Ms. Carol Leeson as assistant principal for Miller Elementary School.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Thank you. So Mr. Juarez moved the item, Mr. Hicks seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed? Item passes. Congratulations.
Yay.
Then we have Assistant Principal, Leonard Guides Elementary School, Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. I'd like to recommend Mr. Mark Pisano Jr. as assistant principal for Leonard Guides Elementary School.
I'll move the
Thank
item.
you.
Second.
Mr. Juarez moved the item, Mr. Hicks seconded. Any other discussion? All in favor say yes.
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 Opposed? Item passes. Congratulations. If we can have the candidates, if they're here, meet us right here, that would be great. We don't have it. I know, you know what, I'm going to try to summarize it a little bit better, just because you're way over here, so you don't even see. I have them. I have them. And I circled them. I'll get my agenda. And then it said who the item.
Tug water. Yeah, going through it? Yeah. Tam and Crystal are going through there. Love Tam. Oh, yeah, they used to go through it. They used to.
I think that you need a water.
Oh, yeah. Where the hell did I drop it at? Oh, okay. Thanks. No, oh, man, I'd be walking home. Thank you.
Board members, it's been requested that we take a really quick 5-minute break since there's a break in the rain and we can run out. Great. Thank you.
I need some water. How many?
Well, I guess you could. All right, thank you so much for allowing us that little break. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting, so if I can ask my colleagues to get up on the dais, please. Come and sit up at the dais, not on the new furniture. All right, so our next item is item 10, the Comprehensive Magnet Plan Revision. Dr. Sanchez.
On the comprehensive magnet plan, it's really one item, so I'm going to go ahead and turn over the fun and excitement to Mr. Foster to explain the one change in the magnet plan and the rationale.
President Grijalva, Governing Board, Dr. Sanchez. We're bringing back the revised comprehensive magnet plan with the one change, which is putting Ochoa back as a magnet school and not a lighthouse school.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to go ahead and move. Oh, do you recommend that, Dr. Sanchez?
Yes, ma'am, I recommend the one change.
Great, I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
So I move the item and Mr. Juarez is seconded. Any other discussion? Dr. Stegeman.
Since I voted against the magnet plan before, and this wasn't the reason, I'll be consistent and vote against this version.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and ask for a roll call vote, please.
Ms. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Hicks?
Yes.
Mr. Juarez?
Yes.
Dr. Stegeman?
No.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, item passes 4-1 with Dr. Stegeman voting against. I'm going to try to summarize because staff is having a really hard time hearing us all the way down here. Okay, the next item is item 11, preschool pilot. Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. The board granted authority for us to identify 5 campuses for our preschool pilot. We identified 5. I stated at that point in time that if we had other preschool campuses come forward and request to be part of this pilot, that I would ask for the number of slots equivalent to the schools we felt could do a good job with the pilot. And so this evening I'd like to request an additional 4 slots for pilot programs for our preschool and for this initiative. And we have the support of the teachers and the principals for these. And Ms. Gallegos is here to just touch on the highlights.
Great, thank you. Ms. Gallego.
Good evening. President Grijalva. Now I have to lower my voice.
Okay.
So back on July 14th, we brought you a plan to integrate our preschool programs, and the goals at that time were to create a consistent schedule with 2 daily sessions in our pilot preschool programs. We also wanted to expand preschool services to our 3-year-olds and to provide more opportunities for students with identified learning needs to be placed in a least restrictive environment. So, I'm sorry, I came running from outside. So after our July 14th meeting, within 3 days, we had 5 schools requesting to be a part of the pilot program. Those 5 schools had the support of the teachers and principal. By July 22nd, we received 9 requests, so we had 9 schools asking to be a part of this pilot. In case you didn't approve 4, because we are requesting an additional 4 tonight, we created a rubric to identify a list of priority schools. So we are requesting the approval of 9 schools rather than the 5, because we do have 9 schools, a total of 9 schools, and I can tell you the names of the schools if you wish.
Yes.
So the schools are Van Buskirk, Mission View, Oyama, Grijalva, Wright, Borton, McCorkle, Whitmore, and Warren.
Great.
So with your approval, we can approve those schools to also implement the pilot.
I'd like to
Okay, thank
recommend
you.
the additional 4.
Thank you, Dr. Sanchez. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. Mr. Juarez moved the item. Ms. Foster seconded. Mr. Hicks.
Do we have a cost of what we've put into the existing ones?
The total cost of our PACE programs, I had shared with you before, it's paid, all of our PACE programs, and this will be part of that, is the designated cost of $2.5 million for all of our 23 PACE programs. This would be a part of that, but now we will be sharing with ExEd, working with those peers, those students that will be identified with learning disabilities. Instead of them being placed in a project table classroom, which is highly restrictive, they will be placed in PACE. So there is no additional cost for this. It's included within the Title I funding that as a district, we committed to supporting our preschool programs.
Thank you. Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. If the board will recall, the whole focus of this initiative was to double capacity within existing confines and to leverage this through both exceptional ed and our pre-K programs working together. So it's a very collaborative effort. We've worked well with our teachers union. They've been at the table the entire time, and then transportation has made adjustments in the scheduling of transportation so that this works out. And so I just wanted to remind the board of that piece.
So it's increasing the capacity of all of the preschools that are participating. So they have an AM and a PM program.
Correct.
Using the same amount of money that's already been budgeted and dedicated.
Correct. Yes.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, Mr. Juarez.
On my visit today at Grijalva, and I believe it's one of the sites, pilot sites, there was 2 parents that were enrolling their children in the early ed center there.
Oh, good.
And I asked them a simple question. I said, where are you from? And they said, well, we're just on the fringe of the district, is essentially what one of them said, not both of them. But I asked, I said, would you consider enrolling your child in TUSD thereafter? And she said a resounding yes. This looks amazing. I understand that this is just some information I'm providing, and it's not representative of everyone in the district. But I continue to believe in this program and the expenses associated with it, because it's going to help increase enrollment. It gets folks that exposed to our district, but also the great things we're doing. And in addition to it, it gets our young children exposed earlier, much earlier, to reading and to a lot of socializing, all the elements that make for a successful child. So when we're dealing with a variety of cultures that sometimes keep their babies at home until they have to go to kindergarten sometimes, I mean, whether it's Nana or Mom or whomever, the idea is that we want to get these kids exposed to education that much earlier. And it's a small window of time, and it gets the kids back with the family. But nonetheless, the mom was also signing up to volunteer in the classroom.
Wonderful.
So,
and that's what we want.
And that's exactly what we're supporting here, I think.
Yes. Mr. Hicks, and then Dr. Stegman.
How many of these preschools are we looking at Central and East Side?
On the east side?
Central and East.
You mean with the pilot or all together?
All together.
I have a list of schools that I can email you, but right now with the pilot, we are looking at Whitmore, to add Whitmore. They are requesting to be a part of the pilot. And let me see, Wright is one of the schools. And I think those are the 2 with the pilot. I don't have the list of all the schools, but I can certainly submit a list to all of you so that you have a list of all the schools. We do not have a lot of schools on the east side, actually, and that's something that we want to look next year to see, to servicing our schools in our community where there is a need. And that is something that we are trying to work with our preschool programs.
Dr. Sanchez.
To that point, we do have successful programs at Soling Tom and at Collier, so I do want to point those out, that those are 2 sites that we do have multiple classrooms of community school pre-Ks there.
Dr. Stegman.
So of the 9 schools, how many currently have PACE programs and how many currently have ABLE programs?
Of the 9, 7 have PACE programs. The other 2, one is a brand new program that would have been an exceptional ed, kind of like a project table program. And then one has a project table, and the teachers and the principals are on board with making it an integrated program.
So none of them have both currently?
Some do. I think one of them does, but I'm not sure. I can check.
But
they were all PACE programs.
Right. So the ones that are PACE programs were solely PACE programs before. Will they get a net increase in funding due to this being part of this pilot?
No, nobody's getting an increase in funding.
even the one that didn't have a program before? Surely they must be getting an increase.
Why would they get an increase in funding?
Well, to pay for the, I'm sorry, maybe, if they didn't have a PACE or ABLE program before, and now they are going to have one,
All
surely
of them
that's
have
gonna
okay,
cost-
so I get what you're asking. So if they had a PACE program already, that PACE program will be changed to the pilot program without incurring additional costs. For the two schools, Whitmore, Borton and Whitmore. Borton had a PACE program that without any additional cost will be changing to the integrated pilot program.
Did you mean ABLE?
It was a project table, yes, sorry. And then Whitmore was getting ready to open a brand new program that probably would have been project table. So we are working with EXED, and with that, with their funding, not additional funding, what they had already designated for Whitmore, making it an integrated program.
So part of my concern was whether this is going to deprive the other schools who aren't in the pilot of funding, and
No, it will not, because these are programs that are already there, would have been there anyway, and we're not taking away funding from any other school.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, the reason why I really am in favor of this model is, one, it's something that I've been advocating for since I first got on the board, the expansion of our preschools, but the fact that you're providing the least restrictive environment for a child. I mean, we have some children in our district that just need a little bit of a boost, and if you put them in a Project ABLE program without any peers that they can talk to and mimic and mirror, you'll end up, the benefits of the preschool might be less than if they were in the least restrictive environment. So I'm absolutely supportive of this. We do have a motion in a second, and Ms. Foster and Mr. Juarez had comments.
My question is about, last time you talked to us and we heard about some of the transportation issues.
Yes.
And now that we have 9, we're adding 4 more. Can you address how transportation has been?
Transportation has actually created a brand new schedule. What was happening is they were giving the teachers, they were picking up at noon while they were delivering kids, and those were not the PACE programs, those were the project table. So transportation was able to create a different schedule where, with the exception of 3 schools that I know Exceptional Ed is working with, they all now have about an hour to 55 minutes in between, which is plenty of time in between. And with the programs that we have, we will do the same thing. We will ensure that there is at least 55 minutes in between the drop-off and pickup.
Okay.
So that's one thing that transportation has been very good about, working with the teachers.
So that's been part of this conversation, because that was one of the issues that was brought up before. And
so we were able to resolve that issue. And again, there are 3 schools that I know, Exceptional Education, Ms. Maura Clark Engel is working with those 3 schools to see how we can change their schedules.
Great, okay. Mr. Juarez.
That was actually my point, because I know that we talked briefly about making modifications to the schedule, but I mean, this really helped solidify the support for this at the local sites, which is really important as well.
Okay. Okay, any other questions? All right, all those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Governing Board Policies, this is a study item. Item 12, Governing Board Policy GCBB Administrator Contracts Revision. Dr. Sanchez.
If the governing board will remember, this policy is a reflection of collaborative work between the district and Eli, which is our administrator union or negotiating group. I mean, it's hard to say administrator union, it's kind of a contradiction, but nonetheless, administrator group. And so this whole purpose, the whole purpose of GCBB is to set in policy the ability and structure for me to recommend to the governing board 2-year contracts for principals who meet set criteria that was discussed with Eli and is set in regulation. Basically, the criteria is they have a material effect on the improvement of student performance on the campus. They have served at the campus and can show that their presence and initiatives have helped that. They also are assuming a principalship on a campus that is challenging. And so those pieces are all through regulation, since they're the operationalization of what GCBB would allow. And so we've already visited with Eli, their leadership, and their legal counsel. They do have a lawyer. And so we did visit with their legal counsel, and they're in agreement with GCBB. It's here for board review. If there are any immediate questions we can address, be happy to. If there are any questions that come up later, you can email me or Ms. Tollison, and we'll be more than happy to research that before we bring it back for a recommendation for approval.
Okay, any questions? All right, thank you. Item number 13, Governing Board Policy GCAA, Family and Medical Leave Act, FMLA, and this is a new policy. Dr. Sanchez.
Yes, ma'am. Basically what GCAA mirrors is what ASBA has in policy, but what we also have in the agreements with our different employee groups. And so it just provides a structure for FMLA within board policy so that it's reflected within governing board policy. So it doesn't restrict or take anything away from what's in the agreements. Rather, it puts it into board policy so that there's alignment, and it's not good practice to have anything less than an FMLA policy. This policy doesn't impose anything beyond what's in federal law. So it basically is a repetition of federal law, and there are any questions about that, Ms. Tolson and I or Ms. Maiden would be more than happy to address those.
Okay, any questions? All right. A
I believe we
study
don't have it already.
14, I know, I'm surprised we don't have a policy, FMLA. Governing Board Policy JK, Student Discipline, Dr. Sanchez.
If the board will review Governing Board Policy JK, it's the merging of 4 pieces: the Unitary Status Plan, the Student Rights and Responsibilities, the Arizona School Boards Association Model Policy, and last but not least, our TUSD non-discrimination policy. And so if there are any specific questions about this policy, Ms. Tollison and I would be happy to address those. If there are any questions that come after the governing board meeting, if you'll email those to either me or Ms. Tollison, we'll be more than happy to provide that level of research prior to the next governing board meeting.
Okay, board members, Dr. Stegman.
So is it expected that this will eliminate any of those other policies, or this is an overlay on top of those?
Dr. Sanchez.
Ms. Tollison will address
Or
that.
Ms.
Thank you.
Tollison.
Dr. Stegman, I would see it as an overlay. What this does is it references the GSRR, which has the force and effective policy on a standalone basis as approved, but it also includes some things that I know have been important to the parties, or expressly from the USP. Hey, infuse this with your non-discrimination language, even though it's elsewhere, it's in AC, for example, or reference in here the USP obligation to engage in a review of your discipline data to make data-driven decisions. So it's sort of an overlay on a whole bunch of layers from the USP.
So I haven't studied this yet. I will be sure to do that. Will it be possible, or will it be clear from looking at the red line version what there is that does not previously appear in any of those other policies? I mean, is there any new content and relative to all those policies? And if so, will that be clear where that is?
I hope so. I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And
I'm
so,
looking at it right now. It
But-
has comments and.
Well, I
dotted
understand that
lines.
it's revisions in this policy, but because it's also bringing material from all these other policies, and I'm asking Ms. Tollison, it will be clear what the original material is, if any. Is there any?
yeah, well, and maybe I may be misunderstanding the question. I mean, there's nothing that's being rescinded or removed from anywhere else.
So the net effect, I mean, I'm not against that, but I mean, the net effect of adopting this policy when it comes back for adoption on our actual disciplinary policies there will be 0. It's just exactly equivalent to what we have?
Yeah, operationally 0.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Ms. Grijalva?
Ms. Grijalva?
Ms. Foster, then Mr. Hicks.
And so when I talked to Dr. Sanchez about this policy during our one-on-one and prepared for tonight, we talked about really it's about consistency so that a principal can't say, well, this is what this policy says, and this is what this policy says, and so that we're being consistent with that language. And so that's what, and then comment 14 says aligns with the USP. Comment 15 says this aligns with the USP GSRR. And up here that says comment 12, this is ASBA. And so I just want to thank staff for, when you read through this, you can definitely see where ASBA is there, where the handbook is, where the USP is, and it just solidifies all of that.
Thank you.
Mr. Hicks.
So thank you, staff, for doing that.
Thank you.
So I'm being a little confused here in regards to the GSRR and this here. So are we going to apply, or here, let me phrase it this way. Are we going to provide this to the students and the families along with the GSRR that we hand out? Because you're saying that they hand in hand, so I think that we need to, when we're handing out the one, it needs to also be accompanied by any of the discipline side of this also.
Okay.
I guess, I mean, when you're saying hand in hand, I think that the GSRR is reflective in our policies. And so I don't foresee having to give parents a copy of policy JK when we're giving out the student rights and responsibilities. That it basically is just reflective of what is in
Then
that
why have
document.
it?
Because
Then
this is
there's no
a
reason to have it.
Dr. Sanchez can respond to that, and then I'll call on you again, Mr. Hicks.
So where we sit right now, we're at the forefront of a very different look in how we're going to design the GSRR moving forward. And so we had a phone call with the Department of Justice today, and in that phone conversation, we're looking at a more inclusive process where we bring community members, where we bring students and parents. And so the board has made many very appropriate critiques that the GSR is written like the penal code, and it's very stifled language, difficult to understand, and sometimes it contradicts itself and makes references to certain pieces. So we're at the forefront of evaluating our entire process, and again, I'm very proud to say we're going to work with the Department of Justice in building a very comprehensive process of what the GSRR is going to look like coming forward next year. And so if you'll imagine the strategic planning process and the level of inclusiveness, we're envisioning something similar for the GSRR. So when we come forward and we take a look at what's the direction from the governing board, when you look at the policy that we're recommending to the board, in essence, it's the umbrella or the high-level review, if you will, in which we build our student code of conduct underneath. So that's why we're presenting it to the board tonight with all of the detail of this is USP, this is ASBA, this is non-discrimination, because what we're asking the board to do is to really use this document as your vehicle and your direction to myself and the staff and all of the people that will work to redesign the GSR to be user-friendly. So this is your umbrella or this is your directive. So when you look at this policy, it should be very much interwoven into the GSR that we bring back. So when you think of what's the expectation from the board on what the GSR should look like, it should reflect this policy. So that's why I'm asking the board to really take a good look at it, because this is to be a reflection of the board's direction, what we bring back.
Mr. Hicks, did you have a follow-up?
I've seen too many times where this one is reflected to this one, and then it gets convoluted, and like you said, it gets, parents are looking at it going, are you kidding me?
Sure.
Kids are, and we're expecting these people to understand. It should be simple. I still believe in the KISS on this. And we shouldn't be making things to where that's directing, if we're going to have it as, like you said, the blanket, and then underneath that would be anything subsequent to that.
Yes, sir. if I may, Ms. Grijalva.
I mean, just to give an example, there is a paragraph here under exclusionary consequences, and it says, for all but most severe offenses, level 4 and 5 offenses in the guidelines for student rights and responsibilities, the district shall limit exclusionary consequences to instances in which student misbehavior is ongoing and escalating, and the district has first attempted and documented appropriate interventions. A temporary removal, as described above, does not constitute an exclusionary consequence. And so the comments there are aligns with USP and GSRR language, aligns with ASBA model language to clarify the distinction. And so it's not that this is supposed to be explaining those other documents, it's just trying to make it like an easier document to read through, as opposed to, for administrators, as opposed to going through the entire GSRR. It's just giving like in general direction. And so because the USP is mentioned here doesn't mean that we're going to be providing our parents with a whole copy of the USP. It's just in the same way that we're not going to be adding this to the GSRR. This is just clarification of where we are as a district. Dr. Stegeman.
So I want to explain the context of my concern, and then there are a couple specific points I'm confused about. I am a little concerned about policy overlap, and the recent example is this board ethics discussion where we had at least 2 policies that we've had for years that talk about board member ethics, and we adopted on top, instead of revising those, we adopted a 3rd policy that sort of overlays on top of those and somehow lines up with them and in some ways is different. Then the other meeting, we had a discussion about maybe a possible 4th policy that wasn't much bringing in the bullets from the other 2 or 3 policies that we have, and so you just have this the accumulating mountain of policies. And so this is the nature of my concern here. And my 2 specific points of confusion are, first, that what Ms. Foster was saying sounded different to me from what Ms. Tollison was saying. So is there a tension between the existing GSRR and our current policies? Do they contradict each other or not?
Ms. Tollison.
Thank you, Ms. Grijalva. Dr. Stigman, I don't believe they do. What we do have is this concept in here that's both verbatim out of the USP and already in the GSRR about the very stringent limitations on when we can use exclusionary consequences. While that's been in policy in that it's in the GSRR and it's also in the USP, that language had never been added into JK. So if somebody just wants to look at, hey, this is the primary discipline policy for the district, it did not articulate that very important restriction on use of suspensions, for example, or have the specific, more expanded references to non-discrimination. So there wasn't a conflict, it was an omission, I would say, in JK.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Now, my second point is ASBA is not the law of the district. ASBA has guideline policies, and in some cases our policies look like that, in some cases they don't. And so when we're talking about incorporating language from ASBA, well, that sounds like, from our viewpoint, new policy, because that isn't, ASBA is not existing policy for us. So when at the points where we're bringing in ASBA language, is that new policy for us?
Dr. Sanchez.
When you take a look at the ASBA model policy, what it provides is a very well-researched point of reference as so far as what is within Arizona's state law as well as court history's boundaries of acceptable consequences. So if you will, consider ASBA as good legal advice. And so when the district adopts ASBA language, it's like adopting good legal advice. And so when we bring ASBA forward, it's putting TUSD within the auspices of good legal advice from the Arizona School Board Association, whose staff attorneys spend a tremendous amount of time interpreting statute into good legal advice for boards to consider for policy language, because their research basically gives a greater sense of assurance than any individual district's action that this is a good interpretation of statutory language.
Yeah, well, I'm almost done, I think, but I'm not criticizing ASBA, but I'm saying in the last administration, we went through wholesale changes of many policies and basically threw out some longstanding TUSD policies and simply plugged in ASBA language, and in some cases it was a material change of policy. It was really a big policy shift for the district to go from existing policy to this boilerplate ASBA language. I'm not saying it was better or worse, but it was a big change. And so sometimes when we bring in the ASB language, it is materially different, and I was asking whether that's true in this case.
No, and so I believe Ms. Tullison answered your question on that. And so again, I'm not a fan of adopting boilerplate language when it comes to doing it to do it.
I don't mean that pejoratively. I just mean...
No, and I understand what you're saying. My point is real simple. It's a study item, and that's why it's here for your review. If there are any other questions, recommendations, or suggestions, we're happy to accept those at this time. That allows us to go back through and work the policy. And in reference to the ethics policy, it's the same thing. The workshop that we'll see later this month is a similar process of merging things together and boiling them down to something that's operational, that the TUSD governing board will hold itself accountable to. And it's a process. When you take a look at the reason why certain policies fit, other policies don't fit, it's the start, stop of different boards, different superintendents, and so we have the opportunity of being able to take some policies, boil them down, make them operational, bring in the community where it's appropriate, ask for their feedback, simplify things, but none of that should take place without the board providing its vision. And so when you look at this policy on discipline, it's your vision, it's your direction, it's your guidance for what we'll build and bring forward as a student code of conduct. So please see it as that.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? All right, that's our last item. So our meeting is adjourned. I would like to remind board members to please go into our executive session room and sign documents. All right, thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Have a good evening.